So you might be wondering, is podcasting right for you? Maybe you've been thinking about doing a podcast for a while, or it's new and you're like, maybe it's time. And we're going to explore that question on how to do a couple of things. How do we start the podcast? How do we build your podcast? And how to run your business podcast? And I'm super excited to be exploring this topic. In Socks to Success, we talk about 113 different ways to brand your business, and podcasting is definitely one of them. And while I'm all about the brand, that's not necessarily my expertise per se. So I'm super excited to be joined here today by Jennifer, who's actually started podcasting back in 2005. And I would guess in 2005, most people didn't even know what a podcast was.
Yeah, when I would talk to folks at Business Mixers and talk about podcasting, I was speaking Klingon. I was speaking a foreign language. They had no idea what I was talking about. And so podcasting from 2005 to where it is now, where it's just part of the mainstream, it's really been lovely to watch the rest of the world learn how to speak Klingon.
Love it. I love it. And I love the Klingon reference. I did a presentation one time where I taught a room of 800 people how to say a friend Klingon, talking about learn and speak the same language. So I love the Klingon reference. So that's exciting. Plus, it's interesting. So Jennifer is a media mixologist with Brewing Media. So those of you watching about the beer and brewing things up. So I was like, oh, what a perfect fit with the Brewing Media. She does quite a bit when it comes to that kind of marketing media world. So she's an award-winning she's a social media community and event organizer, podcaster, virtual event producer, speaker, and entrepreneur. She has a lot going on. So thank you, Jennifer, for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so funny to hear the award winning in front. And I was actually encouraged to put that in there because in 2010, I won a social media award by the Austin American Statesman. So it's kind of funny to hear it. It always kind of strikes me back, but people are like, no, you need to put that in there. I'm like, okay, cool. Podcasting, the thing about podcasting is that it's such a powerful tool. And yet a lot of times it's the tool that people forget. You think, oh, I've got to do YouTube videos. Oh, I've got to write a blog. Oh, I need to do, photos. I need to do these things. But let's not forget that when we were kids, we learned differently. Some people learn by watching, some people learn by writing, some people learn by doing, some people learn by listening. And in theory, if all things being equal, you're leaving a quarter to a third of your audience out if you're not also producing audio content. And maybe it's not a podcast. Maybe you're like, whoa, Jennifer, that's kind of a heavy lift. It could be social audio. Nowadays, social audio is the cat's meow. And if you're wanting to kind of...
What do you mean by social audio?
I've gone into the weeds. Okay, social audio, things like Clubhouse, things like Twitter Spaces, things like Spotify Green Room, things like Facebook's audio rooms and their audio portfolio that they're, slowly releasing out, into more and more users. Audio has really become this big thing. And if you're not participating even at any level, even if it's just hosting a Twitter Spaces room or a Clubhouse room, you're missing out again on a potential of a quarter to a third of your audience. So why would we want to limit our audience? We absolutely shouldn't.
Okay. So we want to make sure we're do marketing that's reaching lots of people the way they want to be reached. And I know for me, and this was probably more pre-COVID because I would spend hours and hours in the car, and I can't really watch YouTube videos while I'm driving. Y'all should not be watching videos while you're driving.
Don't do it.
But it's super easy to put the podcast on and just listen. And so as we look at this from a business perspective, how can a podcast help my business? Why should I have that podcast in addition to reaching more people?
There's a certain intimacy to listening, right? Because typically we jam those earbuds in, or even if we're in the car by ourselves. And so it's just us with the host, with the podcaster or radio, whatever you listen to. And it's a very intimate medium. And there's this real connection there. And it's a connection that's very different because they are in essence whispering in your ear. And it's such a way to really connect with your audience and to share your mission and message. And we all have a mission and a message, and you absolutely should get it out. And speaking your message is a really simple way to do it because we're comfortable with it. We know how to talk about the things we're passionate about. We know how to talk about our business. We know how to talk about the causes that really, really fire us up. And your energy and the enthusiasm you have for those things really come through in audio.
That's awesome. I love it. So we're here today with Jennifer, and we're talking about how to start, build, and run your podcast. So can you get us started with how do we even start a podcast? Because I know it can be a very daunting thing. Like, oh my gosh, where do I even begin?
Yeah, you're not kidding. It can be daunting. So here's what I've come up with, folks. I've come up with what I consider to be the 4 levels of podcasting. Level 1 is you've got your mobile phone and you've got an app, and there's any number of apps that you can use to record your podcast. Very, very simple, low lift. You already own this device. This is your production studio in your pocket, so it's just ready to roll, and we're comfortable talking on the phone, right? It's not like it's something foreign. We're not looking at having some, microphone or some kind of technology that we're not familiar with. So level 1, very easy. Level 2 is where you're going to get a USB mic. You're like, hey, I want to get a USB mic. And in this case, I could show you this one. This is a USB mic right here. Very simple. It's just plugged into my computer. I'm ready to roll. And I've got some software. If I have a Mac, GarageBand comes with it. So you're ready to roll. If not, Audacity is a free cross-platform audio recording software. Download it, use it, you're ready to roll. You'll have to learn to edit. You'll have to learn to do some of those things, but that's okay. If you're wanting to go to level 2, you're kind of ready to get a little techie geeky. And then level 3 is where you're like, I love this podcasting thing. I'm all about it. And I want to build a home studio. Now you're looking at sound treating your area. Now you're looking at, multiple equipment. Now you're looking at really getting maybe a boom arm, and you're wanting to get an XLR mic. And I'm getting in the weeds here, but you're wanting to get more techie, more geeky, and more set because you're really ready to roll in this, and it's a deep dive for you. However, there is still level 4. And before you think level 4 is too much for you, I'm going to tell you that typically when I consult with clients, they're either going to fit into level 1 or level 4, level 2 as well. But let's just say level 1 and level 4 are the easiest to get involved in, because level 4 is you have a mission, you have a message, and it absolutely must get out there. You're not techie, you're not geeky, you don't want to be techie and geeky. You just want to get your message out there. So level 4 is that you work with a podcast producer, whether that's you going in studio and sitting down with your script, and there's a sound engineer there. They've done all the heavy lifting of figuring out the equipment. They know how to use the software. They know how to edit your show. You sit there, you share your message, you get up, you leave, and within a week or so, you're going to have your podcast ready to go out into the wild. And it's a really beautiful thing. And that's either in-house, in studio, or virtual. And nowadays, a lot of things are virtual. So I work with clients like that all the time. And it's just so easy to have it done, and then it gets done for you. So level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 4, identify where it is that you want to start, and then start going there. And I'll say that it's really easy to start with level 1, soft, tiptoe your way into it, do kind of a soft launch, beta test it, see how you like it, because it's better to go that route than to go to the level 3 where you build a full studio and then you start podcasting and go, ooh, I kind of don't like this thing. And then you've already made a big investment. And so it's better to kind of ease your way into podcasting than to really try and go all out.
All right. So at least we have options now of, do we want to kind of do it ourselves? Do we want to do basic? Do we want to do a high level? I know it's interesting with video. So many people are like, if I'm going to do video, I need to be like professional, have the studio set up. And a lot of people are doing exactly what we're doing right now. We're on Restream. Some people are using Zoom. Some people are using StreamYard, and it's super basic. But I don't know if people think about podcasting the same way. Any idea why people are looking at podcasting like it's a bigger beast?
I think it has to do with the fact that right now what we're doing, people are seeing us on camera. What they're not seeing is all the tech behind the scenes, right? They're not seeing the DSLR camera or the webcam. They're not seeing the ring light or the softbox light. They're not seeing the mic. You saw the mic because I showed it to you. They're not seeing all of the things. And so they're just seeing us, and it seems like a lower lift. The reality is it can be a heavier lift to go this route, but we're more comfortable with it. Now, when you see podcasters on video, they've got headphones on. They've got the mic in their face. You know that they've got gear and they're doing stuff, and that right there feels like a little bit more of a heavy lift, even though in essence actually isn't a heavier lift. But it's just a perceived barrier to entry. And then of course there's the post-production aspect of it, where you're needing to do the editing. Live is better. I can tell you, as a 16-year podcast veteran, I have gotten real comfortable with live and letting the flubs fly, because post-production time-wise will eat your lunch if you have a longer show. So if you can get comfortable with live and just letting it roll out the door, then it's going to be easier. But some folks really want that NPR-ish style, or they really want to fine tune and edit. And if they're interviewing guests, they want to pull out all the ums and the ahs, which I get that. And it's up to you to find that level for you. There's no wrong way for you to do your show. There's the right way for you.
Yeah. And so we do have somebody from Facebook sharing, thank you for sharing. Not sure who you are, Facebook user, but thanks for the comment. We appreciate having you here as we're talking all over podcasts. For those of you watching live, you do have the opportunity, if you want to put into the comments, send us your questions, and we will make sure we get you some answers. So we talked a little bit about starting the business podcast. The second part of our conversation that we want to talk about is, how do we be build the business podcast? Speaking of messing up, I can't talk today, apparently. So how do you build the business podcast?
So it's all great and fine and dandy because there's a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of work and a lot of pre-planning that goes into getting your podcast launched, right? And then you're like, you're proud of your baby. You're like, there it is out in the wild, but it is not a set it and forget it. Much like social media, you've got to pay attention to, you got to feed that baby. You need to take care of it. You need to nurture it. And so what you need to do is make sure that it's a part of your messaging that's going out. Make sure you do all of the like the trailers. Like if you think about a movie, they do all those trailers and all the teases and all the interviews in advance. And then it's like, here's the movie. And then it's all the stuff that comes after. You need to do the same thing for your show. If you want to just model what television shows do, what Hollywood does, it's a great model. It actually works. Tell folks what's coming, tease them, invite them to be part of the journey, then announce it and launch it, and then have them be part of that journey as well. And then afterwards, continue to keep them part of your journey. And you may think, well, if they've heard the show, then they're done. It's like, no, not at all. There's things they may have missed. They may not have had an episode, or there's a gold nugget within that 20-minute show that you're like, this is the thing I need to do. So you can create audiograms around it or quote graphics. And there's all kinds of things that you can do after the fact, but that's all part of building and growing. I mean, if we think about this, anything like once you created your Facebook account profile or your Twitter profile, it wasn't like you said, I am here, and that was it. You've got to feed it every day. So with the growth of your podcast, you're going to want to nurture it. If you're doing an interview show, you're going to want to think about who those interviewees are and who their audience is, because you're not just talking to them and they're not just talking to your audience. You're also speaking to their audience. And that's a really great way to grow, is to bring folks in, because their audience is going to be interested in what you're doing. Beyond that, hopefully some of those will stick around long after their favorite person or their favorite guest was on your show.
So what are your thoughts on, because I know some people do a podcast and it's like them talking. Some people do an interview format. Sometimes it's a group. Sometimes it's a variety. What's kind of your thoughts on the different kind of ways that you can do the podcast, whether it's solo, guest, community?
Yeah, I think it has to be right for you. And I'll tell you that typically if we look at the podcast length, a lot of times what people ask is like, well, how long should my show be? And it's like, well, it should be as long as it needs to be for you to get your message out. I have podcasts that I listen to that are 3+ hours long, and they're not long enough. And I have shows that I listen to that are 10 to 12 minutes long, and they're perfectly the right amount of time. And yet it just depends on the mission and the message that podcaster has. And I'll tell you that if we look at, I shared the 4 levels of podcasting. I'll also share the 4 types of lengths of podcasts. We'll look at a micro show, which is 1 to 3 minutes. And those are just like, a quick nugget, like a so-and-so moment or a so-and-so minute. And it's something really short, and it's just a little nugget of information, or a little micro nugget of information. And then I think about the nugget shows, which are 5 to 10 minutes. And if you want to look at an example of that, you can look at Nutrition Diva. Nutrition Diva does shows anywhere from 9 to like 11 minutes on average. And those are what I consider a nugget show. And then you go to what I call the commuter shows, on average 20 to 30 minutes on an average commute. Now, I know if you live in bigger cities that have lots of traffic, you're like 20, 30 minutes. There's no way I'm there. Well, you get to listen to 2 shows in that amount of time if it takes you an hour. But then we look at the long form shows, and those are 45 minutes plus. They typically like that 3-hour show that I mentioned. Those are your long form shows. And most of those are live because, again, I shared with you, post-production will eat your lunch the longer that your show is, but not always. Some of them, like Hardcore History, are very well scripted and put together, but they only release a show a few times a year, because of the fact that it is such an in-depth process to build that. So what's the right amount of show? What's the right length? What's the right style? It depends on your mission and your message and the way that you want to do it. So it's a hard answer, but it's something that as you go through the process of building your podcast, you'll identify what that is. What I tell folks to do, I encourage them, is go listen to the shows that you are gravitated towards. Are they solo shows? Are they nugget shows? Are they interview shows? Is it a co-host show? What is that? Because then that's your natural affinity. And the goal for you to build your podcast and grow it and sustain it, and sustaining is really the key here, is for it to be something that you enjoy, that you believe in, that really fits in line with your mission and your message, and that flows well with your business. Because if it is something out in left field and your business is over here in right field, and it's like you have to make this trek every single time you want to do the podcast to go to the other field to do it, it won't sustain. And it has to be something that's just part and parcel and built into the framework of what you're already doing. And then it just becomes a seamless part of your business day, week, month, year.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, that is a question I hear frequently. How long should be the podcast that we listen to? And you're right. I've got some that are like 10 minutes that are perfect. And then I subscribe to the Losers Club. It like dives into Stephen King books. And some of them are 4 hours long and really in depth. And I'm like, we could have had more on it. Those usually don't get listened to all at once. All right. So we talked a little bit about building. I know you've got some ideas on how do you run the podcast, because you mentioned sustainability. So can you talk to us a
Mhm.
little bit about how to run the podcast, how to keep it going?
Right. I like the idea. When I first started podcasting in 2005, it was kind of like once you started a show until forever or until you pod faded. Then in more recent years, you've heard this thing called seasons and series, which I absolutely love. It's modeled after television series, right? The television series doesn't go on forever. They take a break. They have a season. And it makes sense to go that route. So I'm a big fan of that. I think it's a good idea because it gives you this break in between. And in between, when you're in essence off season, what you're doing is you're sharing little nuggets from the show. You're doing audiograms, you're pushing that content to YouTube, you're doing quote graphics, you're repurposing that content because people may not have got it when it got live, and then pointing back to the original show. You're able to kind of do a recap or highlight those guests again, tag those guests again. So there's a lot of things you can do in between seasons, and then you're also going to tease the upcoming season. We've got a new season coming and it's this topic, and you want to stay tuned because we go live here or it drops here. And so there's an opportunity for you to have that break as a podcaster, but also not lose the momentum and the steam of your show because you're repurposing content and sharing content in between with your audience.
Excellent. I love it. Yeah, the seasons, I love the idea of season, because then it's like if it's a gap, it's not, hey, they left for 10 weeks. Where'd they go? Did they
Mhm.
stop? It's no, we're just end of season 2. And just like the TV studios do, just because we started season 1 in September doesn't mean we have to start season 2 in September.
Mhm.
There's lots of flexibility, and it gives some ending to your audience as they're waiting, hopefully, for the next season.
Mhm.
Now, if people are listening to this and they're thinking, you know what? I was thinking about podcasting. I don't think I'm quite ready yet. However, maybe I want to dip my toe in the water. Maybe I want to try and be a guest on some podcasts. So, like, what's your recommendation? How to be a guest on a podcast?
So I recommend that there's services that you can join for that. There's a lot of guest booking services that you can do, and there you can just do Google that, podcast guest, and there'll be a whole list of places you can put your stuff in there. But it could also be within the groups that you're in, right? So for example, the reason that I am a guest on your show is because we're in a group together. And all of a sudden now there's conversations happening within the group. And now, talking about podcasting, I'm someone who's been in the space for a really long time. I'm a good fit for you and you're a good fit for me. And so now here we are. So think about the groups that you're in and the people that you're in the group with, because you already have a relationship with them. And even if you don't have a relationship with them personally, you have a relationship within the group dynamic. But also, if you have a favorite podcaster that you absolutely love, you're a fan of their show and you're like, man, the stuff they do is awesome, and you would like for them to be a guest on your show, or you would like to be a guest on their show and you're a good fit for them, start a relationship with them, start engaging with them, give them a review, on their podcast. Leave them a comment. If they go live, show up in the audience and comment on the show. Be an active member of their listenership, be part of their audience. And then when the opportunity comes up for you to be a guest, it's there, because now you're not a stranger, much like how Tiffany and I aren't strangers, right? We're connected because we're in a group. Now you're someone that they know. There's also just your network. It could be that there's someone in your network that knows that you'd be a great guest. I would put the word out to your network. Hey, I'm looking to be a guest on shows. Here's my list of types of shows that I would like to be a guest on. And then your network may be the one that connects you. Because I know I've done that for friends as well, who they're launching a new course, or or they have a new book that's coming out, or they have a new challenge that they're putting out there. And they're like, hey, who do you know that would be good so that I can talk about this on their show? And it's got to be something that's reciprocal. It can't just be a broadcast or one way. There has to be value that you give to the podcast host. But it's a really great way to kind of grow together, is to lean into your network, which is pretty much how we do business anyway.
I totally works for me. That's my spell space, networks and referrals. Yeah, once or twice a year, I'll be like, all right, who do you know who has a podcast that brings in guests? I'm ready. I'm ready to be there. The more the merrier. Do you have like one or two of your top tips if I was to be a guest, or whomever, the people that are watching, if they were to be a guest on a podcast, what would be a tip or two you would give for being an amazing guest?
I would say have a little pre-show with the podcaster that you're going to be talking to, and it doesn't have to be anything extensive, but just have a little bit of dialogue with them in advance so that you kind of have a little bit of an understanding of the rundown. Because they, as a guest, we should be watching the show or listening to the show at least in episodes, that we have a framework or an understanding of how the host runs their show. But even then, it's a good idea to kind of just have a little chit chat in advance, because it gives you both kind of a sense of ease of how this is going to flow, and so there's no surprises or anything that's unexpected. And it's a nice kind of way to kind of ease into it. Some guests, if you're a host, some guests want to get questions in advance. And so if that is what they want, even if you don't normally do that, do that. I mean, if you're a host, lean into what your guest has a comfort level with. Not everybody is comfortable with on the fly. I'm comfortable with on the fly because I'm comfortable in this space, but not everyone is. And so if somebody asks you for questions as a host, and if you're a guest and you're intimidated to ask for questions if that makes you comfortable. You want to be comfortable in front of the camera, in front of the mic. And if that's what it takes for you to do so, ask. And if they say, well, we don't normally do that, you could say, I get that. Can you just give me a basic framework of the types of questions that you'll be asking? We want you as a host. I want my guests to be comfortable. And if it takes them having questions in advance, happy to do it. No bigs on my part. And if somebody pushes back on that, then you're probably not going to be comfortable in that space. Even if they're like, oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. If that makes you uneasy and uncomfortable, then maybe you need to know that that's probably not something for you. Because again, just because you've been asked to be a guest doesn't mean you have to be. And it needs to be something that works for you. It should work both ways. Podcasting is a tool, it's a platform. But if you're not comfortable with where you're at, get comfortable. And as a host, I always encourage us to go that extra step to make our guests comfortable, because then we'll have a more amazing show. Because if you're having someone on your show, you want them to shine. You want them to, have a spotlight on them and to bring out the very best, to bring value to your audience. And if they're not comfortable, they won't be. And we absolutely need that comfort level on both sides.
Yeah, the last thing we want to do is an awkward interview, and it's not like we're doing Barbara Walters where we're like trying to get to the story. Most of well, maybe some people's, but the business podcast that I'm in, yeah, it's not quite so hardcore. So we've been here today talking with Jennifer about how to start, build, and run your business podcast. It's been awesome having you here. Can you share with the viewing audience how to get in touch with you or what you got going on in your world, all that kind of fun stuff?
Sure. On social, I am at ePodcaster, the letter E with the word podcaster all together. I've been that version of myself for many, many years. And so most folks, if you go on social, you'll see me on Twitter, on Instagram, on anywhere as ePodcaster. The thing that's coming up that folks watching this may be interested in is National Podcast Post Month, which happens every November. This is the 14th year, napodpomo.org. It is modeled after NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writers Month. In National Novel Writers Month, you write 50,000 words in the month of November. For NaPodPomo, you do 30 podcast episodes in 30 days. So whether you do them one a day, whether you batch record them on the weekend, whether you show up on November 30th and record all 30 episodes in that day in order to accomplish the goal of the challenge, which is to have 30 episodes by the end of the month. The key here is that I like to call it the Fail Fast, Get Good Challenge. If you've been thinking about getting into podcasting, if you're kind of unsure if podcasting is your thing, I invite you to join us in a safe community space. You will discover very quickly if podcasting is your thing. And I can tell you, based on the last years of experience, that folks who come in as a new podcaster, they have launched shows off of this. And then veteran podcasters like myself, we like to use NaPodPomo as an opportunity for us to experiment, again, in a safe community space where even though we're veteran podcasters, we may be wanting to try something new, but may not want to try it new out in the wide world, but in this little community challenge. And it's a lot of fun. And it seems daunting because in the US, we have a Thanksgiving holiday that occurs towards the end of the month. And you're thinking, I have to do a show that day. Hey, batch record in advance, make up for it later. There's not any hard, fast rules on how and when you do it. As long as on the 30th, you've got 30 episodes that you've recorded, guess what? You win.
Love it, love it. And I'm a big fan of batching. Instead of trying to, put my podcast out every day or every week and recording it that day and getting it up. I love, like today, I'm going to be hanging out here on Zoom recording a half a dozen videos to put out over the next couple of weeks. I'm a big, big fan of batch, especially because when you're on video, you have to do the hair and makeup. Podcasting is a little bit nicer because you don't have to worry. People aren't necessarily seeing your face. But I want to say thank you so much for being here with us, Jennifer, to talk to us about how to start, build, and run your business podcast. Podcasting is one of the 113 ways we talk about in success to help you build your brand, to be memorable, which will help you get more clients and more referrals. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for watching today. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye.
Happy networking, y'all.
Oh, man.
Oops.